in our code, and then I'll leave you to it.
Recording in progress.
Okay, well, Bill, thank you so much for taking the time to chat to us today. For many of us, you have been a very iconic part of our childhood as we've been growing up, voicing some of the most iconic characters, of course, in the Disney universe. So I just want to start off by saying thank you so much for taking the time to chat to us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm glad to be back in Australia. It's been a number of years, and it's also nice to get away from the heat of summer into kind of a nice little rainy, kind of cool Melbourne. And we walked around today. It was just delightful to get away from 100-degree heat.
Well, us Melburnians are freezing at the moment, so we have welcomed you into some pretty cold weather. But Bill, I wanted to start off by asking, what does it mean for you to get to come to somewhere like Metro Comic Con and meet your fans? What does that mean to you personally?
You know, first of all, it gives me a kind of a viewpoint of how these shows and creations reach people and what they mean to people. I did a Goofy movie about 30 years ago, and at the time it wasn't that popular a movie, but over the years it has turned into a cult classic, and every Comic-Con that I go to today, people without fail ask me about a Goofy movie, and they'll say, I couldn't talk to my dad, and that movie came on and became our thing and brought us together. And there's so many stories that I've heard over the years that I had no idea of. And so getting to meet the public and the fans out there and hear what these cartoons and movies mean is really gratifying, because when you do this stuff, you just go into a booth, usually just with a script and a microphone, and you do your lines. And since we are not looking at a finished picture, or we have no idea what it's going to look like until it's out in the theater or on TV, we have no idea of what kind of impact it's going to have. But at a Comic-Con, you do. You get to meet all of the fans, and they're just wonderful all over the world. This is my 10th time to Australia, and they're fantastic friends. I remember a woman that came down from Japan just to meet me, and she was so demure and shy and nice, but I thought, wow, she got on a plane that far just to meet me, and it was just kind of a head trip for me. It was just kind of wow. And you don't get that when you're stuck in a studio.
Yeah, definitely. And do you find now that those fans are multi-generational as well? Because, of course, the people that grew up with you voicing Goofy and Pluto now have kids of their own, and, of course, there's their parents as well. So do you find that your fans are multi-generational now?
Oh, absolutely. And it's so funny with the Goofy movie, of course, it's about Goofy and his son Max. And I'll always have people come up and say, when it came out in 1995, I sided with Max on everything. And now I got kids 30 years later. Now I understand what Goofy was talking about. So it is kind of a big circle of life kind of thing.
So take us right back. How did you become the voice of Goofy? Because, of course, you were doing other movies as well. You did RoboCop and films like that
Yes.
as well. How did you get into voice acting, and how did you then start to voice Goofy?
Well, I was always one of those kids that loved movies and television and cartoons, and I was in a little town, Midwest town in south central Kansas. There was no outlet for anything theatrical in those days, and I would just kind of start imitating the cartoon characters that I like, Bugs Bunny and Oh, brother, ain't I a stinker? Kermit the Frog, and many others. And I'd go up to my mom and dad and do that at dinner, and I'd do the television stars that I'd see on TV, like, Pat Buttram. And my mom, would you like to get me some mashed potatoes and gravy? They'd look at me, and my dad would say, there's something wrong with that kid. And, it was just for jokes. I didn't know it was ever going to turn into anything. Well, I got a degree in broadcast journalism. I kicked around in radio for a number of years as a DJ and as a chief engineer at some little podunk stations in Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, doing the news and commercials, and I would invent characters that I would bring on just to kind of spice up a boring afternoon. And I'd bring on Wolfman Jack, who was a big old DJ in those days, a popular voice. And so, how you doing there, Bill? We gonna have a good time. Thank you, Wolfman. Okay, we're having a wonderful time today. And so I did that for a few years. Then in Dallas, on a whim, I went to a comedy club and went up on stage, wrote a little comedy routine for a week after I saw this. They had open mic night, and it was a pretty good little hit. So I started going back and doing this over and over, and within a few months, I was starting to travel as a stand-up comic in Texas, and then ultimately most of the United States. And then in 1986, my wife and I decided to move to California to see what we could do in Hollywood. And as luck would have it, about 5 months after I moved to California and was able to get an agent, they came to me and said, my agent just said, do you do any of the Disney characters? And I said, well, yeah, Goofy's my favorite, always has been, and I can do a pretty good Goofy. And okay, so they got me a cassette of the original voice, and I laid it down, not knowing that I'd be competing against about 1,000 other people. And out of that 1,000, they called me in, and my first job was January 17th, actually January 23rd of 1987. So now I've done this for 38 years almost, and through the years I've become a Disney legend, and I've done about 3,000 programs for Disney and added about 50 other characters to that, and Warner Brothers and many of the other studios, and it's just been growing and growing. And now everyone's asking me, why am I not retiring? And I said, why would I leave the most fun job in the world? As long as they call, I'll keep going.
Definitely. So that explains the voice acting side, but with the regular acting as well, like in RoboCop and the other ones that you've done, where did that passion come from?
I always wanted to be in movies of some type. I remember seeing, usually fantastic kind of movies, science fiction movies when I was a kid, and I thought, God, Hollywood would be amazing to work in, never thinking I would. And in Dallas is where I did RoboCop, and that was just an audition, an open audition. They were shooting that film in Dallas, and they needed an on-the-street reporter, and I won that audition out of however many people tried out. And so that kind of got me going on camera. And over the years, I've done many more on-camera stuff. I've actually produced and have a show that was on Disney for 3 years called It's a Dog's Life with Bill Farmer, live action. I produced it as well as starred in it. And I'm not only doing animated dogs. This was a show about real working dogs and the kind of dogs that they use to rescue people and stuff. So, yeah, when I get a chance, I love to do live action as well.
So tell us a little bit about with the voice acting. You mentioned before that for you to be able to do Goofy, they played you the original cassettes of the voice. What do you find easier? Do you find it easier to copy a voice like that, or to find a voice when you're given a character where you're the person creating the voice for it?
It's better to create a voice because you get to give that voice a personality. With a voice match, you have to be much more careful about honoring what has gone on before. And since Goofy was an iconic character since the 1930s, I wanted to make sure I could get as close to his, not just voice, but his personality. As a teacher that I once had said, no, it's not as much about the voices, it's about the acting. It's not voice acting, it's voice acting. The acting is the important part. You can't really realize a character unless you can get to the heart of what this character is and his personality. If you can play the personality, the voice kind of comes naturally afterwards.
Like you said before, the films, when you go in to do the voice, are not normally completed. How do you find the personality of an animated character when the film's not completed? Like, do you just go through the script and try and work out a personality from that? How does that process work for you?
Yeah, quite often when they're doing the audition process, they will have a synopsis and what the character is like. Is he mean? if he's mean, he might have kind of a tight voice like this, or an evil character, or is he a happy character like Goofy is? Gosh, howdy, he's just kind of a good old boy, and he's just got that kind of total optimism that comes through in the way he speaks and does things. Goofy can fall off a mountain and he'll pick himself up and just keep on going. Donald would throw a tantrum. They all have different personalities, and if you can kind of hone in on those personalities, that just gives the words a whole lot more meaning for the animators.
Definitely. So you've done voices as well, of course, in movies like Minions, Monsters Inc. as well. With those ones,
Right.
How long do you get to work on those characters? Because you do a number of different voices for characters in those movies. How long do you get to work on each character?
You don't get to work on them. Most of the time, ancillary characters are instantaneous. For example, if we were doing Beauty and the Beast, I was in Beauty and the Beast in a couple of scenes where the villagers are attacking the castle, and all we have to do is get out there, a group of actors in a large stage, and kill the beast, attack the castle, just words that you would just kind of ad lib along the way, and boy, that's about as long as you get. Sometimes you do sound effects. In the movie Beauty and the Beast, probably the most obscure thing I've ever done is when Gaston is singing about decorating with antlers in the bar. He throws 3 eggs up in the air, and they go, look, look, look. And that's me. I'm eggs. So you never know what you're going to get a chance to do. My son recognized me in Shrek 2, where I did, along with several other people, an announcement for a party that they were having at the castle. And the line I had to say was like, "Ladies and gentlemen, introducing Princess Fiona and Prince Shrek." And I did that. About 4 other actors did that at the same time in the studio. They picked mine, and at the movie, my son heard that and said, "Hey, Dad, that's you." And I go, "Oh, I guess it is. I forgot I did that." So, it's sometimes hard for me to even figure out what I did in some movies.
Definitely. Now, Bill, I know we are running out of time very, very quickly. So to finish off, I've got 2 quick questions. What are you hoping to do in Melbourne while you're here for Metro Comic Con, apart from the convention itself?
Well, I've made a lot of friends here in Melbourne. We're going to be seeing and going to dinner tonight with some of them. Some of them have come visited me in Los Angeles, and I found it interesting that they love to come to my house around Halloween time. They say that there's not a lot of Halloween stuff going on, but they love to hand out candy. We usually get around 500 kids that come to our house to get candy, and all our friends from Australia love to hand it out and talk to the kids and everything. And so I've got a kind of a secondary family down here that we're going to be. I came in early because the con is Saturday and Sunday, and I'm going to be partying until that time with a lot of friends that I've made over the years here in Australia.
Awesome. And Bill, to finish off, what would you like to say to our listeners out there who are thinking about heading along to Metro Comic Con this weekend to come along and meet you?
Gosh, I'd love to meet you, and Bill would too. Come on down. Yeah, I'd love to meet you, and it's going to be a great time. It always is when I come down here.